All right, good afternoon. It's that rather difficult hour to have a conversation. I know it's getting a bit warm. I see people fanning themselves. That's a good sign. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Korir Singoe. I'm Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kenya. And I wish to join His Excellency the President to welcome you again to Nairobi and to welcome you to the Africa Climate Summit and to welcome you to this panel, this high-level dialogue on climate security, resilience, fragility, and displacement in the borderlands of the Horn of Africa. Now, one of the major legacies of colonialism is the creation of borders on an arbitrary basis, resulting in dislocations, fragmentation of communities, hardening of barriers, and making communication onerous. However, the climate crisis is no respecter of borders. The question is, how can borderlands, rather than accentuate fragility, become sites for collective action, innovation, and adaptability? Excellencies, the side event convened by IGAD, the African Union, and the government of Kenya seeks to engage on the challenges and potential of borderlands as it relates to responsive climate action. Our panelists are pen holders, policymakers, and leading thinkers of inestimable experience, and it is therefore my pleasure to welcome them to the stage. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Wokene Gabayehu, the Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, to come to the stage. Please, let's put our hands together for him. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Hannah Tete to come to the stage. It is my pleasure to welcome Alessandro Scobi, Head of Climate Unit of the European Commission, to come to the stage. It is my pleasure to welcome my brother, the Principal Secretary for Interior and National Administration of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. Raymond Omolo, to come to the stage. It's my pleasure to welcome the Governor of the great people of Wajir in the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Ahmed Abdullahi, to come to the stage. It is my pleasure to welcome Neil Wigan, the new High Commissioner of the United Kingdom to Kenya, to come to the stage. I'm not sure whether His Excellency, the Minister for Environment, Climate and Communications of the Republic of Ireland, is here already. If he's not, I think we should be ready to proceed, except I also want to check whether Her Excellency Ambassador Joseph Esako is in the, not house, but tent. Okay. So, because of time, I should really wish to say that we will proceed as follows. I'll ask His Excellency Dr. Wokene Gabayehu, the Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, to give his keynote remarks And I should hope that those keynote remarks last for almost 5 minutes. I will then request each of the panelists to make their opening statements that should not last for longer than 3 minutes, and then we will go into a small conversation. We will open towards the end of this panel. We'll create an opportunity for question and answer session. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure now to welcome Wokene Gabayeho to come and give his keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my brother. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, PS. Your Excellencies, panelists, participants, diplomats, academicians, all guests, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to this high-level regional interministerial conference on climate security. Our purpose today resounds with urgency to confront the complex relationship between climate security and the lives of our people. I am therefore profoundly honored to stand before you as Executive Secretary of IGAD, united by our common cause to address the climate emergencies and transcends all borders and call for extraordinary cooperation. For over a century, our brothers and sisters in the borderlands have navigated the stormy seas of conflict and displacement, demonstrating unwavering resilience in our region and beyond. Today, as we face a new adversary, the climate emergency, we must embrace our shared history, learning from the lessons of the past to forge a united path forward. Let us, for a moment, look closer to home here. We call it a greater Horn. History has cooked up a cocktail of challenges for us. But we, the people of this region, united by our shared adversity, came together 37 years ago to establish an organization that has working day and night to change the victims to agents. We embarked on the journey not just as a weather the storm of the devastating drought and conflict, but the strive to face the adversity and proactively capitalize on opportunities we create for transformative change. And yet our story is now facing a new and formidable adversary, that is climate emergency. Imagine with me the IGAD region, where 61 million of us here stands at the crossroad of climate impacts and conflict-induced turmoil. Yet even with this narrative of adversity lies the seeds of opportunity. We find ourselves at the crossroad of potential transformation, at a juncture where resilience can emerge from fragility, where unity can rise from discord. Our region contributes at least the emissions causing global climate change. No, and yet is ironically the most affected by the worst of the consequences across all aspects of our life. Environmentally, dear colleagues, our projections show that over the next 15 years, the IGAD region is set to heat up twice as fast as global average. Economically, reports by the World Bank and IMF showed that the recent drought reduced productivity in our member states by up to 2.5%. And other projections show that Africa's GDP may reduce by 30% in 2050 due to the climate change. From a humanitarian standpoint, we are still feeling the effect of the protracted drought that threatens the life of over 5.4 million of our brothers and sisters and killed over 9.5 million of our livestock, destroying household income, which is very important for the region. Oddly enough, only 2 years ago, part of our region were affected by intense flooding which displaced over 700,000, that is almost beyond that, in South Sudan and affected over 6 million others. Climate change, therefore, is a crisis that knows no border, as APS said, a challenge that transcends our geopolitical boundaries. The sands of the Sahel, the plains of the Rift Valley, the rugged terrain of the Horn, all bear witness to the relentless march of climate change. Should we fail in our duty to mitigate, adapt, and collaborate, we risk unleashing a cycle of conflict, displacement, and insecurity that will be felt far beyond our shores. But let's be known, IGAD and our member states, in the absence of the comprehensive international accord on climate security, have risen with the determination to craft solutions that light the way in the atmosphere of uncertainty. The IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center, that we call it ICPAC, stands as a testament to our commitment to international cooperation in addressing the climate change. By working closely with the international institutions of 11 East African countries to harness the power of science and collaboration, we are advancing climate forecast, empowering us to build resilience in the face of adversity. It remains a beacon of hope for our region. Similarly, the IGAD Regional Climate Security Coordination Mechanism is an innovation of great significance for our region and is now our bridge to the future. It is a multilateral platform that connects our member states, the African Union, and the United Nations. That is the Office of the Special Envoy is here. My sister, Madam Anna Tete, she worked with us very closely to this endeavor. We are therefore not merely administrators of policy, we are architects of our change. Our responsibility transcends speech. It demands actions. And we have been very active. The Kampala Ministerial Declaration on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change is one of the cornerstones of our efforts to this direction. As we stand here, the Kampala Declaration is being adopted regional-wide and is the testament of its significance in reshaping our response to climate change and forging paths towards a climate-safe and sustainable future. Conflict is another challenge in our region, and as well as is the greatest threat to the effective solution we are implementing to climate change. To address this convergence of climate change and conflict, we must embrace an integrated approach, one that brings together conflict resolution, peace building, sustainable development, and climate adaptation strategies. Let us also draw from the well of knowledge that flows not only within our experiences, but from the research and findings of our wider world. In 2022, Health Effects Institute report on the state of air quality and health impacts in Africa paints also the worrying picture. This report found the air pollution is taking a dangerous toll in our continent. Accordingly, 14% of a child dies under the age of 5. In the same vein, the recently released 2023 IMF report on climate change in fragile and conflict-affected states further reinforces our own finding from the IGAD conflict and early warning mechanism that the relationship between conflict and climate change. The IGAD region is home to one of the largest displaced populations in the world, consisting of over 4.5 million refugees and 12 million internally displaced peoples who have been forced to abandon their homes because of the multifaceted challenges, including conflict and climate change. Excellencies, so what lies ahead? What path should we tread in this uncharted territory of climate security? The answer lies in a raft of coordinated response and our harmony of hearts and minds. As we navigate this uncharted territory, Let us please not only words but actions. We must forge partnerships that stretch beyond borders, reach out to our neighbors with outreached hands of cooperation, collaboration in the spirit of multilateralism. We must channel resources not only to the well-prepared, but the fragile, the conflict-affected, and more vulnerable communities. So our mandate is very clear. It is to forge policy coherence to address the vulnerable arising from climate change-induced mitigation and displacement into very fabric of regional and international framework. In conclusion, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, let us not forge that this journey is not solitary. The IGAD Secretariat stands unwavering, ready to provide the necessary support to propel the climate security agenda forward. We shall not walk alone. Our goal is clear: to protect our people, to safeguard our environment, and to leave behind a legacy that future generations will cherish. Thank you very much, and I wish all the liberation for the panelists. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for His Excellency Wakene. It's now my pleasure to invite Her Excellency Hannah Tete, a distinguished diplomat and the present or the current Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General for the Horn of Africa, to speak briefly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Korir Singwe, the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please forgive me if I don't get the whole title right, of the government of Kenya. Your Excellency, Dr. Wakene Gebeyehu, my elder brother. I call him my elder brother because that's the relationship that we've enjoyed. And currently the Executive Secretary of IGAD, distinguished panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's hot. I'm sure you would be glad if there was a bit more air conditioning, but we're talking about climate change. So perhaps it's exactly the ideal conditions to have everybody seated, to be thinking about how do we address this, so that at this time of the year, which in Kenya would normally not be the same as it is in my part of Africa, in West Africa, much more hot and humid and tropical, that we could find ourselves getting back to what used to be normal, but what certainly is not the new normal of today. My office, the Office of the Special Envoy to the UN Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, has had the pleasure of working with IGAD to develop the climate security mechanism. But it's not just with IGAD, it's with IGAD and all of its member states. And so to that extent, I would say that it's important for us to recognize that this is the region where the member states have been the most forward-leaning in understanding the link between climate change and its impact on peace and security, but not looking at it just from the perspective of state security, but really looking at it from the perspective of human security. And the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center is a center of excellence, not just for this region, but for the continent. Because quite frankly, the rest of the continent doesn't yet have anything like it. And so it's an example for the African Union and also for other member states to look at in trying to build the kind of platforms to help us understand exactly how climate change is affecting the region and what policy measures need to be put in place to be able to address these challenges from a medium to long-term perspective. So what has happened with the climate security mechanism, which we work on directly with IGAD, and we would very much like to work on a continental level, and I think that's an aspiration for the UN as a whole, is to be able to understand and to track how climate change impacts peace and security at the community and therefore at the state level. So how does this link with borderlands? Because where you have the challenges of communities that find themselves at risk and it is at the point where national borders intersect. They are the places where there could be friction that then become incidents that could then become further escalated into climate, peace, and security impacted challenges between member states within the region. And so if we can put a laser focus on issues relating to the way in which this is impacting border regions. For instance, if you think between Kenya and Ethiopia, and you look at the area of the Mandera Triangle, and when you look at the data that is generated by ICPAC, and if you just went onto their website right now, you would see it, that this is an area where you can see that there is a huge risk of drought, and indeed there has been drought previously over the last 3 years. So because of that, you find a situation where indeed the people there find themselves more vulnerable to hunger simply because their normal agrarian pastimes and pastoral means of generating income are no longer available to them. And yet they cross borders as if the borders didn't exist. And this is an opportunity, as I said, for friction if not well managed. But I'm just mentioning one example. In this region, you could talk about several. And so the case that I'm making to you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, is that where you have a region that has set up a center and that has created the mechanisms for evidence-based policy making, and where you have member states who have gone through a process all the way up to the heads of state level and endorsed and accepted that they need to have a climate security mechanism in order to be able to monitor and evaluate what is going on, and where therefore there is the opportunity to have evidence-based solutions to addressing these crises before they become crises that then are drivers of migration, then it behoves on us, the international community, to put our money where our mouth is and to support it. And so that essentially is the case that we are making relative to this issue of how we deal with climate, peace, and security challenges and how we deal with the challenges across borderlands. And for all of you here who are representatives of partners who have committed to supporting the continent on addressing its peace and security challenges, and who indeed say that you want to help to address these in a major way so that we don't see the kind of figures that Dr. Wakene just gave becoming the reality. Well, to put it briefly, this is your opportunity. I hope you don't miss it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency Hannah Tete. We've just been joined by His Excellency Eamon Ryan, the Minister for Environment, Climate and Communications of the Republic of Ireland. Karibu sana. It's my pleasure now to welcome the High Commissioner of the United Kingdom to speak, the State Minister for Development of the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Principal Secretary, Excellencies, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. So my colleagues, the Executive Secretary has set out the challenges the region faces with much more authority and knowledge than I could, and Her Excellency, the Special Envoy, has set out some of the elements of the necessary solution. And so let me try to address, I will not repeat the challenges, but I will at least try to talk a little bit about the solution. But the UK fully agrees with the diagnosis of the scale of the problem in the Horn of Africa that His Excellency, the Executive Secretary, set out. We've been deeply engaged in this region for a long time, and since 2019, the UK has committed more than £1 billion in humanitarian aid to the region to address the interlinked crises of drought, flooding, and conflict, working with our partners, including many of those represented here today, like IGAD, the Government of Kenya, the United Nations, the European Commission, and others, to try to help the lives of millions of people in the region affected by those crises. We're also trying to broaden international support and gather international attention for this crisis. And in May, at the United Nations in New York, we co-hosted a pledging conference for the region involving countries from the Gulf and elsewhere, which mobilized more than $2 billion in funding. We have also launched, recognizing the complexity of the border region that the Principal Secretary set out, we've mobilized a project working on the borderlands specifically, across borders, emulating the work that we've seen from EGAD and others working in these complex environments. Our program is a cross-border project that tries to build peace and stability in that region between Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia, an area highly affected by climate change. We're trying to support collaboration between these three countries, support local administrations, and support the communities affected there. We're trying to support the effectiveness of national responses to insecurity along the border. Critically, we're also trying to work with local organizations because we understand the need of local leadership to build genuine resilience, especially from those too often excluded, including women and girls. So we have supported and championed the principles for locally led adaptation and invested in programs like the LDC Initiative for Adaptation and Resilience, which is working in Ethiopia and Uganda. On where it comes to climate change specifically, everybody knows that the Horn of Africa is in the eye of the storm, as the Special Envoy set out, and faces particularly acute pressure from climate. Yet the region receives a deeply insufficient and inadequate level of climate finance. With limited funding, climate adaptation cannot be taken to scale, and the region's humanitarian caseload continues to grow. So we believe that climate vulnerable countries and communities in the Horn of Africa urgently need improved access to finance, to adapt to climate change, to restore nature, and to prevent biodiversity loss and adapt green growth pathways. We also know that women, girls, and those already marginalized are worst affected by these challenges, and so our response must center their needs, their voices, and their priorities. To show that we are serious about this, the UK co-chaired a task force on access to climate finance, which is pioneering a new approach to addressing the barriers facing climate vulnerable countries in accessing climate finance. We're supporting 6 country trials of the task force approach, backed by a commitment of £100 million from the UK to catalyse a shift towards longer-term support aligned behind countries' climate and nature priorities, with the aim of mobilising further funding from other bilateral, multilateral, and private sector resources. We recognise that countries like those in the Horn of Africa face particularly unique challenges in accessing finance. So I'm pleased to say that through the task force, we have opened negotiations with the government of Somalia about trialling this new approach. We hope that come the end of the year, by the time of COP28, we'll have taken steps to increase the level of climate resources provided to Somalia and elsewhere in the region. I'm also pleased to announce that this week at Africa Climate Summit, we are launching £34 million of new projects aimed at building climate resilience across Africa and particularly affecting this region. This includes projects under our WISER program to strengthen early warning systems, in particular ICPAC, EGAD's Climate Predictions and Applications Centre, which, as SRSG Teta says, is a regional and indeed a global leader in these areas. And through our additional support to this programme, we hope to provide improved access to climate services for 400,000 farmers in East Africa. We are also launching a new Passage project, which will work with transient cross-border pastoralist communities whose movement across frontiers were described by the Principal Secretary and others, to help them managing the worsening impacts of drought and extreme temperature through strengthening their action to anticipate these problems. We recognise, of course, that these challenges go beyond what we, the UK, can do as one nation. We recognise that to meet the scale of the challenges, we also need to champion diverse and innovative forms of financing. The UK is supporting disaster risk financing mechanisms such as the African Risk Capacity, ARC, a specialised agency of the African Union with capital and premium subsidies. This will help African countries purchase insurance against climate-related disasters. As the other speakers have said, The challenges of building resilience to climate change in this region are immense, and we will not meet them without increasing the scale, quality, and accessibility of climate finance. The United Kingdom is determined to play our part in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Neil, for your intervention. It's my pleasure now to invite my brother, Dr. Raymond Omolo, the Principal Secretary of Internal Security, to give his intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother Pierce, my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would try and work within the established timelines. First of all is to appreciate everyone for finding time to be part of this high-level dialogue on resilience, fragility, and displacement in the borderlands of the Horn of Africa. And my brother, the Executive Secretary in charge of IGAD, when we had time settling in, was able to welcome me to this high-level panel discussion. And part of why that is significant is the fact that we are one people. And IGAD is operating from Nairobi, and it goes to speak to the level of collaboration that countries can have and the impact that countries can make when they work together. And just for purposes of noting, of course, IGAD has Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, and Uganda, of course, Kenya being among the 8 member states. Now, the climate resilience in the Horn of Africa is critical for stability, prosperity, and growth. Its borderlands face unique challenges, just like has been highlighted by previous speakers. And these challenges are exacerbated by the climate shocks, which impact on resilience of communities. And this creates a lot of fragility and triggers displacement. And it's also critical to note that my brother, the governor for Wajir, is also here. And coming from counties on the northern part of this country, along the border with Somalia as well as Ethiopia, to an extent, our fellow countrymen who live along the borderlines have also taken more than everybody else. When you talk about refugees, we have camps that have hosted refugees for in excess or close to 40 years. And this largely we can be able to attribute to the effects of climate change, amongst other challenges on security within the region. The Horn of Africa borderlands and the people who inhabit them are not necessarily defined by political borders. And while individual countries may have their own priorities and programs, the communities that inhabit borderlands face common challenges. Whether you're talking about scarcity of water, degraded pasture, of course, and insecurity. Now, these factors, as well as the common vulnerabilities to shocks and conflicts, cannot be tackled through national programs alone. And there is need for cross-border collaboration, coordinated interventions, and shared entry points. Within the IGAD framework, there are a number of programs that we are running to try to address some of this. And again, working with the international partners. My friend from the UK has spoken to the Borderlands program that we recently launched a few months ago, just to try and address the challenges across, at least for the 3 countries, that is Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. And the people in these 3 countries are basically one people, same culture with similar habits, and it makes much more sense and impact to have a program that looks at several countries put together. Now, this demonstrates that there is a lot of opportunity in terms of cooperation as a region. And part of that opportunity is to create or promote investment in climate resilience, stability, and economic development in these areas. Looking at what we are discussing this afternoon, I think part of the focus or the messaging that we need to try and look into is ability to identify some of the specific risks related to climate change. Of course, there are underlying issues on insecurity and marginalization, as well as lack of development. As a country, and I think as a region, we have just come from one of the longest dry season. I think something that we've never seen for over 40 years. And that meant that a majority of our people lost their livelihoods, and there is need to try to quickly address that. But as we address that, then we also need to be able to anticipate what is it that we've learned over the years that can help us improve on such situations, so that when we face the real effects of climate change, like we continue to do, then we don't lose a critical mass of our populace to those effects. Now, I've spoken to the need for regional response to manage these risks, of course, working together with the international partners. And lastly, is that it is now no secret that the international financial architecture, including climate finance, is not yet targeting the Horn of Africa region. And we have an opportunity to make a difference in that space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother Raymond, for your intervention. In the interest of hearing the full Kenyan story on this matter, I'll invite His Excellency Ahmed Abdullahi, the Governor of Wajir County, to speak. He'll be followed by Alejandra Scobi, the head of climate unit within the European Commission, and Minister Ryan will then speak after that and conclude the panel. Thank you very much. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, PS. I was wondering how I was going to deliver what I wanted in 3 minutes. Thank you for your generosity, but I'll try not to read the speech, but just talk through it. Distinguished delegates and the panelists, my name is Ahmed Abdullahi, Governor of Wajir. I also double up as the Vice Chair of the Council of Governors of Kenya. I want to thank IGAD for organizing these side events at this important summit, whose topic is resilience in the context of borderlands in the Horn of Africa. And I'll try and use my county as a case in point. Wajir County is about 10% of the landmass of Kenya. It has an extensive border with Somalia to the east, and we also share a border with Ethiopia to the north. And our people are, to this day, largely still pastoralists, and pastoralism still remains to be our main economic activity. I'll speak to the challenges that faces us. I think even without the complex challenges of climate change, the borderlands, which are largely arid, have generally had, because of legacy issues, developmental issues, all the key performance indicators relative to the rest of the country or countries they're in have not been looking good. This is in terms of infrastructural development, availability of water, educational literacy levels, and all. So climate change has exacerbated our situation. The last year, we had a very serious drought in this part of the continent and in Kenya. And for us, it was the 5th failed season. So you can imagine 5 failed seasons of rain for a community that is dependent on free ranching, where people walk around with their livestock as a means of livelihood. That's how they pay their school fees. That milk from the livestock and the meat is what they survive on. So it was pretty bad. And we had to seek a lot of help in actually keeping people alive, feeding them, and providing water, both as county governments, but also the national government of Kenya and our development partners have come in to help. Of course, also you're aware that because of the challenges of the proximity to the border areas, we deal with, and the lifestyle of our people as well, we deal with frequent conflicts and at times counter conflicts. We deal with issues of youth radicalization and terror groups. And this also complicates lives in the borderlands. And because of the nature of the communities and the interlinkages and the patriarchal nature of our lineages, at times a conflict in one country spills over to the next. So our conflicts don't know borders, really. And you can have a situation in your hand, not as a result of something that erupted in your territory, but from across the border. So these grim realities underscore the critical need for resilience and looking at it in a more focused way in our part of the continent, in Horn of Africa, and especially in the borderland countries. As a county, and which I think speaks also for my colleagues in the region, to try and deal with these issues, we came up with County Climate Change Fund Acts, where we set aside some money to deal specifically with climate-related conflicts and issues of drought mitigation. Some of the things, multifaceted approach that we need to adopt, and I'm skipping most of the things in the interest of time, to deal with these vulnerabilities of climate change, which has actually just generally, sort of exacerbated pre-existing vulnerabilities, because we were vulnerable even before the climate change issues, is one, to deal with scarcity of water. A lot of our food security today has to do with the challenges of water. Usually I say in Kenya, where there is water, or the parts that have water, no longer have land because of the dense population. And where there is land to farm, up in the north, which accounts for, and northeast, which accounts for about 70 to 75% of the territory of Kenya, there is not sufficient water to carry out any meaningful agriculture. So our climate adaptation issue is also, our climate crisis is largely a water crisis in many ways. There are issues to do with financing and resourcing. The subnationals, be they counties or states or provinces or districts, we might call them different names in different places, is really where the action happens. We might have all the nice policies up in our headquarters, but where the rubber meets the road really is in the villages, the wards, the counties, the states. And whatever financing mechanism we come up with here needs to trickle down and do actual work in the county. And I'm glad that in the next 10 today, our president just launched the second phase of a program financed by the World Bank named FLOCA, which tries to deal with climate resilience at the county level. We are, of course, worried about this carbon credit business also, because a lot of the subnationals may not be understanding it. And at times, from where I sit in my office in Wajir, I get told of how people are claiming carbon credit for my rangelands without me being aware of it. So I think there is also need. We've now just passed in Kenya a new law. There is need to connect back climate financing back to the subnationals, so that communities actually who do the work, who preserve the environment and the rangelands, are the ones benefiting from that financing model. So the subnationals serve as a link between the grassroots, the necessities of the grassroots, the imperatives of the grassroots, and the national policy goals. And there is need for alignment between the national and the subnationals. We deal with cross-border conflicts, so there is need for organizations such as IGAD to also understand our situation in the borderlands and create better inter-border cooperation at subnational level across counties, across country borders. And at times we do that. There are times that I'm
You
forced
have a minute,
to speak
Your Excellency. You have a minute.
I'm winding up.
Thank you.
To my colleague across the border in Somalia, just to deal with a situation at that level. Those from Somalia will understand that I share a border at Dif and Gerile. And you know what's happening in Gerile now. There is need to build skills for people at the subnational level. There is need to prioritize community-led security initiatives and strengthening regional frameworks. There is need for better data collection at that level, because that data that we use at national level. So in conclusion, the active participation of subnationals governments is invaluable for building resilience, to deal with all these cross-border issues, rangeland management issues, changing demographics, complex security situations, complex spatial planning issues, because our settlements and the proliferation of the same is growing at a much faster rate than we can cope up with, cultural issues and changing cultural issues also. We are at crossroads in many ways. And the intimate knowledge of the local conditions is what makes the subnationals as essential contributors to a complex and multi-layered strategy. So as we design programs up here, let's just look at two things: the trickle-down effect to the common man on the ground and the speed of implementation. I'll stop there in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I know that presentation deserved more time because it gives us such a granular picture of what really happens within borderlands. But thank you for your intervention. It is my pleasure to invite Alejandra Scobie, the head of Climate Unit within the EU Commission. Please.
Thank you very much, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to share with you some of our thoughts on how climate finance for both mitigation and adaptation can actually be used to address the multiple challenges of climate and security, as well as fragility at community, as well as a regional level. The distinguished panelists before me have already set out the scene very well, illustrating what the challenges are. I think not only at the regional level and the national level, but with the last speaker at the subnational level, and the interconnection, of course, between the governance aspects. We've already heard some hints to what the solutions could be, whether they are homegrown or international partnership. What I would like today to do is really to take a deep dive into one specific initiative that we find particularly interesting in the context of the Horn of Africa, to illustrate how climate finance can really be brought to bear for the transformative actions that we need to see. And this is the Horn of Africa initiative. And it's a great honor, in fact, to be speaking here on behalf of the donors group supporting the Horn of Africa initiative, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, Germany, the European Commission, and of course in strong partnership with IGAD. To set the scene, even though I guess most of you will be familiar with the initiative itself, it is an initiative that was launched by the ministries, the ministers of finance of the region back in 2019, and it's really looking at how partnerships across the regions and governments can really harness the opportunities that are, in shared challenges. Apologies for this. I hope you can hear me well. This is just to keep you awake in the heat of the afternoon. So of course the initiative is owned and launched and owned and really grown by the ministers of finance of the regions, of the countries in the region, to address regional challenges in a coordinated manner, focusing of course on natural disasters, climate change, but also fragility and insecurity. It's acts on 4 key priorities, and these are critical to advance the social and economic development of the region. Connectivity, whether it is energy, transport, or digital, that has a critical role to play, of course, for growth, but also for low carbon and development. Resilience, critical in particular for the pastoralist communities in the region. Fostering integration around economic and trade links across the different countries. And finally, developing further human capital so that the solutions can really be grown at home. This is the only thing that we need to really target in order for the transition to be just and everybody to be fully on board. The donor partners have joined the efforts of the Ministries of Finance to support priority actions that have been identified by the governments themselves in the context of the Horn of Africa initiative. And we're really very much engaged in the region, mobilizing a total of $8 billion in programs and projects that are either ongoing or in the pipeline then program. And of course, we're always open to new partners joining us in supporting the Horn of Africa initiative. So today, I wanted to share with you just a small piece of information. The initiative is actually preparing a roadmap that is meant to accelerate the development in the borderlands of the Horn of Africa with a focus on resilience building, in particular to the impacts of climate change, working with national partners, but also relevant regional and international organizations. And of course, IGAD is a critical partner to that. The roadmap will be presented at the next ministerial meeting of the Horn of Africa initiative, which will take place in October in Addis. And so the discussions today are really very timely to inform such a roadmap. I also wanted to take the opportunity to mention a couple of projects and programs that are part of the initiative and are funded by the different partners that are supporting the Horn of Africa initiative. The Africa Development Bank has established a climate action window that is aiming to mobilize 420 million to start with, to provide an opportunity for countries in the region to accelerate climate resilient and low carbon development. And is really helping and offering opportunity rather to countries to mobilize resources to support farmers and pastoralists, for instance, by providing access to climate resistant seeds or climate weather information for agriculture. The World Bank has launched the DRIVE project. This is working to enable the region to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Again, focusing on livestock and pastoralist communities to ensure that marginalized groups can also be benefiting from economic development in the region. And the project aims to mobilize $572 million in private capital for this end. Thank you very much. But now I cannot read my notes. All right. The European Commission has launched the Peaceful and Resilient Borderland projects that has mobilized a total of 42 million US dollar in grants that is really intended to support the Horn of Africa region to address the causes of instability and conflict. In particular, looking at the root causes associated with the impacts of climate change, building resilience across cross-border communities. It's really looking at applying an integrated approach that is bringing together conflict prevention, peace building, and resilience building, including, of course, to climate change, as well as capitalize on the humanitarian development peace nexus. Finally, Germany, the newest supporter of the Horn of Africa initiative, has committed this year 29 million euros for technical and financial assistance cooperation with IGAD, focusing on supporting the preparation for the adverse effects of climate change and disaster resilience, again, at the community level. So these are just some of the examples that are helping turn the Horn of Africa initiative that Ministries of Finance have launched into reality, and we're looking to mobilize many more and implement many more initiatives, as I have mentioned. I want to conclude by thanking you once again for organizing this very important event and for giving me the opportunity to share on behalf of the donor group some of the initiatives that we are supporting. We do truly believe that the Horn of Africa initiative, which is fully owned by the governments of the region, has the potential to bring all actors together to really catalyze the transformation that we need to see. It is a long way to go, but we are getting there for sure, and I think this is a very crucial initiative for that purpose. You can rest reassured that our president, as well as our Commissioner for International Partnership, Jutta Urpilainen, and our EU Special Representative for the Horn of Africa, Annette Weber, are really strongly engaged in the region and are particularly interested in supporting and advancing our thinking and implementation around climate change resilience as a way of building capacities and development as well as economic growth. They will certainly be asking me to report back to them the discussions we're having today, and so they will feed into our further thinking for the region. I will stop here for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Alejandra, for your intervention. I'll yield the floor now to Minister Eamon Ryan to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honoured to be able to give an Irish perspective to this critical issue about how we do cross-border climate adaptation in the context of the sustainable food and system and security challenges that exist in the world today. Learning so much today about that complexity, that multiple dimensions in terms of climate and the security challenge, how they go together. The unpredictable impacts on soils, on yields, on water, on disease burden, and the need for climate adaptation and resilience, particularly in the context of food systems, is becoming such an existential issue for all of humanity, but no more important a region than in the Horn of Africa, where we can see the immediate challenge. When we hear 5 years in a row the rain's not coming, it's hard to credit how you can manage to work through still in such difficult circumstances. For our part, we're committed to addressing as best we can help the food and nutrition security through what's called a food systems lens. It means taking into account, firstly, addressing the immediate food security and nutrition issues for growing populations. Secondly, providing livelihoods for those in farming and in the food system. And most importantly as well, improving environmental sustainability as we do that. To support that, we've committed and we will deliver the doubling of our government funding to climate finance to €225 million by 2025, the vast majority of which, some 93% at the moment, goes to adaptation, because we see that as the biggest gap, and particularly in the supporting the most vulnerable countries where it's not going to. The global financial system is not delivering the necessary finance to meet these needs. The scarcity of climate finance, particularly not coming to the Horn of Africa, we recognise that has to be increased, and we work with our within our European Union colleague to try and change that situation. We're also committed as a country to investing in research and innovation on food systems, through partnership with entities such as the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research. But finally, I suppose we recognise that ultimately that achieving a sustainable, resilient, equitable, healthy food systems is ultimately a political question. It's political decision-making, political systems need to change, organisation needs to change if we're going to protect all our people. We're trying to put these principles into practice and into partnerships in the Horn of Africa. Over the last number of years, we've taken a prominent role in responding to conflict, fragility and climate impacts in the Horn. In 2022, 21-22, we provided some 181 million euros of support funding for immediate life-saving humanitarian aid, but also for developing funding to address the underlying causes of food insecurity and to build community resilience. In Kenya, we're working through our joint Ireland-Kenya agri-food strategy to put innovation for climate-smart agriculture and food systems at the centre of transforming dairy and potato value chains. Our work with IFAD supports adaptation through channeling climate and environmental finance to smallholder farms, while its crisis initiative boosts agricultural productive capacity, food supply chains and irrigation in Somalia. Over the next 3 years, we're committed to provide 15 million to a new programme to address child wasting in the Horn, where focus will be on the borderlands of Kenya, Ethiopia and Somalia. One of the 3 outcomes of the programme will be to support alternative livelihoods and sustainable communities in the context of climate change. It's explicitly designed to encourage community-led programming and learning, including cross-border communities in areas which have experienced conflict and insecurity. We are acutely aware of the potential for this kind of cooperation to contribute to peace. In West Pokot in Kenya, we are supporting partners who explore how climate adaptation can be deliberately mobilized as a neutral entry point to bring together divided communities. It's something we know about in Ireland. We have our own border and lack of connection and the lessons we can learn from that in collaboration, or we can learn here, we might apply just as much at home through our Shared in Ireland initiative. Finally, reflection. It's clear that the underlying causes of food and nutrition insecurity, from climate change to the unsustainable economies of food, are driven by cross-border regional and international dynamics. And tackling these challenges requires sustained large-scale international action. As I said, it's political action we need as well, as much as anything else. During our 2 years as a member of the Security Council in 2021 and 2022, we constantly highlighted the link between climate and security. We were particularly pleased to work with Niger in presenting a motion to the General Assembly, which, although it didn't pass through, got a huge vote, an unprecedented vote, was blocked in the end. And we're very appreciative that Kenya continued to promote that agenda in the following year on the Council. Together, we made intensive efforts, as I said, to try and bring that agenda forward, and we very much welcome the African Union's engagement on developing a common African position on climate and security in advance of COP28. It's been the most inspiring thing today is to listen and learn from that visionary sense of where we can go. We are pleased to support some of the evidence collection underpinning this work through IGAD's Climate and Security Project here in the Horn. Today's dialogue is a testament to the extent to which the imperatives of climate and security are understood in the region. We need to move from that understanding to action, and thank you very much for giving us a chance to share our thoughts here today.
Thank you very much, Minister Ryan. The panel has demonstrated the logic of a regional response, the need for multi-scalar approach to the challenge of climate change, particularly in borderlands, that links not only the regional to the national and to the subnational has equally been demonstrated. What is very clear is that there are diverse mechanisms in place already at the normative level, whether it's the Kampala Declaration or whether it's the Treaty on Transhumance by IGAD. There are a couple of institutions as well, and there are funding mechanisms already in place. What is also clear is the fact that there are capacity constraints. The challenge around understanding the role of communities in the carbon trading infrastructure remains important. There are still gaps in research and in data which require to be mitigated, and the need to really zoom on the issues around food systems, a value chain approach is equally important, as is the need to deepen our partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, we have overshot our time. However, I would perhaps entertain 2 questions before we close. 2 questions from the floor. There being no questions. All right, there you go. Go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Desigan Naidu. I'm from South Africa. I couldn't leave you in the lurch having asked for a question. I want to ask the question in a different direction. I mean, we're talking about places that are in heavy conflict and constant instability. Can the climate cooperation help to actually build the peace initiatives and develop development partnerships? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Any other question? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Hello?
We're blind on this side.
Okay, thank you everyone for your excellent remarks. My name is Andrew Chachi, a researcher from the International Crisis Group. My question is this, I mean, given there have been rightful focus on mitigation finance and proliferating private finance for green development, adaptation in fragile and conflict-affected states seems to kind of be overlooked and on the back burner. The speakers artfully articulated some of the risks of overlooking that, but to me it seems like unless if there's a more broad, even if public funds are proliferated and spent at scale, there seems to be a need for more auto-generative, innovative financial solutions to mitigate these risks in fragile and conflict-affected countries. What do panelists have to say, I guess, or what are the perspectives on how we can increase funding, both through public coffers, but also kind of thinking creatively to meet this gap? Because we're, 100 billion was supposed to be met this year, but we're talking about trillions in terms of what's needed. Over.
Thank you very much. Do we have takers to those questions? All right. Hannah Teta, please. I wish there was a mic that could roam. Do we have a mic? Okay.
Thank you very much. Now, the point that you make about some of those border areas being in conflict is valid. And it is precisely the reason why we are saying that you must deal with this not just through a development lens, but through a peace and security lens. And then you should also factor in the dimensions of the impact of the climate crisis in mediation processes, so that even as you are coming to develop agreements that will be implemented over time, in the implementation of those agreements, you also take into consideration the work that needs to be done to be able to address the climate causes of the conflict in the first place. Now, the tendency has been to see the development conversation and the peace and security conversation as 2 separate poles, almost as if there are silos that are not connected. And we know that life doesn't happen in silos. So what we're saying is that you need to take a more pragmatic, evidence-based approach to dealing with these issues, and in developing solutions, develop holistic solutions. But the point that was also made about the importance of engaging with, at the state level or at the sub-national governance level, in order to be able to do this is equally critical. Because fundamentally you're talking about people. And you must go to where the people are. You will not develop a solution at 10,000 feet for it to be effective. It has to be done, and it has to be done in such a way that it meets the need. On the issue relating to financing, you would see from my initial intervention, I like to keep things simple. We've talked about billions of dollars of financing. I'm sure that if you asked many of the representatives of member states here, they would say they haven't seen it. So you can create all the mechanisms in the world. If the rubber doesn't hit the road, it doesn't really make any difference. And I think that when it comes to issues relating to adaptation, all right? Because mitigation, that's where the private sector investment maybe can take an interest, all right? We're talking about green energy solutions and all of that. When you're talking about adaptation, that's where we need to see how we get reform in the IFIs for them to be more forward-looking on this issue, because it's not going to come from private sector investment. It will either come from state investment, the states are fragile, they already have challenges, or this is where we need to step up and make the difference.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Governor Ahmed.
I think the previous responder has actually done justice to it. I just wanted to add, two things. And I'm not sure it's in my place, but the whole question of climate justice. And if we're going to talk about global warming, who contributes more to it and who bears the impact of that, the adverse impact of it. So there's need to tackle that and get places like ours that are now moving from arid or semi-arid to hyper-aridity as a result of climate change get better funded. Two, I think public-private partnerships. Because of global geopolitics, I think there is need for certain places and certain people to diversify their supply chains, and we're seeing that happening. So there's a lot more that the private sector could do with us in coming to invest in dry land agriculture, for instance, as a means of supplying food to the world, or even investing in things like cotton and apparels, and in the process doing agroforestry to deal with climate change. Thank you.
I give my brother Raymond to speak, Alejandra.
Thank you very much. I
Really make it short if you can. Thank you.
Yes, I couldn't miss the opportunity, but I will be short. I mean, can climate action build partnership? Absolutely, and I think that's exactly what we're doing in this room and everywhere and across the world. I mean, I have many examples of how EU and member states are using climate together with our partners to build such a relation and really try to move together, harnessing the opportunities from the Green Partnership with Morocco to the, maybe I'm anticipating something, you will see some new initiatives with Kenya in the context of the summit. So that's definitely an area where we will continue to work, where all the partnership and initiatives that are launched at the COP are exactly that, building this partnership. We shouldn't forget the local level, and that's why we work with the Global Covenant of Mayors in particular to try and bring action to the ground. And I think working with cities and local authorities will remain fundamental, and any ideas on how that can be stepped up would be fantastic. On financing, I mean, you were saying, we all heard about the trillions. Where are they? Can we actually mobilize them? What is the role of the private sector? What is the role of the governments and public financing? I think from our side, we are increasingly trying to find innovative ways of de-risking investments to enable private sector to enter in either countries or sectors where they wouldn't otherwise, but it's quite clear that that is only one part of the equation. And we do need to look at innovative sources. We do need to look at philanthropies. You mentioned private-public partnership. Now there's an extra P to be added, which is public-private philanthropies and partnerships. I mean, I really think there is scope. The summit in Paris, the Global Finance Impact Summit, has opened up a lot of avenues that we need to continue exploring, whether it is the reform of the global financial architecture or rethinking the MDB strategies or looking at new sources. These are all areas where a few years back, they were not even in the radar, and I think we have made tremendous progress, but we still have a long way to go. But again, the direction, to me at least, is clear. Let's hope, let's try to walk in that direction together.
Thank you, Alejandra. Dr. Omal.
Thank you. Maybe just to speak to the two issues, of course, which have been well responded to, is that when you look at the issues on the initiatives on climate to address the stability in the region, one of the things that we agree on is that it definitely plays a bigger role. But then there are other aspects that we also must look into, particularly with regards to the politics and the governance architecture that exists within the various states. So that if you try to isolate them, then yes, you'll make some progress, but at the same time, you still run into challenges. In terms of being innovative in financing, I think a lot of the financing models are more top-down as opposed to bottom-up. There needs to be much more conversation and engagement, particularly at the sub-national level, like the governor had indicated. And also to appreciate the uniqueness of each of these regions. Without that, you'd pump in a lot of money, but you really won't see any much difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give another round of applause to all our distinguished panelists. Sadly, we have to end it here in the interest of time. Thank you all for being here, and I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank the conveners of this panel, IGAD, the Republic of Kenya, and other actors who have brought this together. I want to really thank them. Thank you very much. We'll just do a quick group picture, and then we make our way up. Thank you.
Well, you only need the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go. Only know you for now when you're feeling low. Only hate the road when you're missing home. Only know you love her when you let her go. Hey, you let her go. Staring at the bottom of your glass, hoping one day you'll make a dream last. But dreams come slow and they go so fast. You see her when you close your eyes. Well, you only need the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go. Only know you for now when you're feeling low. Only hate the road when you're missing home. Only know you love her when you let her go. Hey, you let her go. Staring at the bottom of I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. Baby, I'ma have the best freaking night of my life. And wherever it takes me, I'm down for the ride. Baby, don't you know I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. 'Cause I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. Baby, I'ma have the best freaking night of my life. And wherever it takes me, I'm down for the ride. Baby, don't you know I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. You know I'm down for whatever tonight. I don't need the finer things in life. No matter where I go, it's a good time. Yeah. And I don't need to sit in VIP. Middle of the floor, that's where I'll be. Don't got a lot, but that's enough for me. Yeah. 'Cause I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. Baby, I'ma have the best freaking night of my life. And wherever it takes me, I'm down for the ride. Baby, don't you know I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. So I just let it go, let it go. Oh na 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 na, no I don't care no more, care no more. Oh na 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 na, so come on, let me know, let me know. Put your hands up, no na na, no baby, nothing's gonna stop us tonight. 'Cause I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. Baby, I'ma have the best freaking night of my life. And wherever it takes me, I'm down for the ride. Baby, don't you know I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. 'Cause I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. the start, you fade away. Afraid our aim is out of sight. Wanna see us alive. Where are you now? Where are you now? Where are you now? Is it all in a fantasy? Where are you now? Were you only imaginary? Where are you now? Under the sea, under the sea. Where are you now? Without you, lost is running wild inside of me. I'm faded, I'm faded. So lost, I'm faded, I'm faded. So lost, I'm faded. Shallow waters never meant what I needed. I'm letting go, a deeper dive, eternal silence of the sea. I'm breathing alive. Where are you now? Where are you now? Under the blue, the faded lights, you set my heart on fire. Where are you now? Where are you now? You're the light, you're the night, you're the color of my blood. You're the cure, you're the pain, you're the only thing I wanna touch. Never knew that it could mean so much, so much. You're the fear, I don't care, 'cause I've never been so high. Follow me through the dark, let me take you past our satellites. You can see the world you brought to life, to life. So love me like you do, love me like you do, love me like you do, love me like you do. Touch me like were good, we were gold. Kind of dream that can't be sold. We were right till we weren't. Built a home and watched it burn. I didn't wanna leave you, I didn't wanna lie. Started to cry, but then remembered I can find myself flowers, write my name in the sand, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing and make it home my head. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. Cherry red, match the roses that you left. No remorse, no regrets. I forgive every word you said. Oh, I didn't wanna leave you, I didn't wanna fight. Started to cry, but then remembered I can find myself flowers, write my name in the sand, talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing and make it home my head. Yeah, I can love me better than you can. Get on me back, get on me back, baby. Get on me back, get on me back, baby. Get on me back, get on me back, baby. Get on me back, get on me back. It starts with a word. All I know, so watch you I tried so hard and got so far. In the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. In the end, it doesn't even matter. We tried so hard and got so far. In the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall.
used to believe we were burning on the edge of something beautiful, something beautiful. Selling a dream, smoke and mirrors keep us waiting on a miracle.